welcome back to Performing the Arts. And if you can believe it or not, this is episode 50. Yes, episode 50 of this podcast that I just started last year in the midst of quarantine and whatnot, where I had nothing else to do but talk to my friends about theater and acting and stuff like that too. But I feel like I'm at a point where it's like this podcast has grown up to become an actual podcast instead of just talking to friends. But anyway, uh, I'm talking with today. I'm talking with Hannah Fierman, not Fierman.
Fierman,
Yeah,
like
Fierman.
fear.
Fierman.
Yeah.
And you've probably seen her in the VHS segment Amateur Night or its follow up Siren, or you've probably seen her in recently in Creepshow or in other, movies, so forth and so on. But Hannah, thank you
Yeah.
for thank you for being a guest on my podcast. But how did you get into the performing? Easy question, but how did you get into the performing arts?
Well, my parents got me into it when I was really young. My mom did a lot of theater as a child, and she got me in ballet and into the theater and into singing performances very, very young, like at 3. And
Oh wow!
and I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it as much as she did, so it really worked out. And yeah, my father is a bit of an artist as well. He does all sorts of character work. He does lots of different voices and is an amazing storyteller. So I think I got that from him, where I really just enjoy telling stories through art.
Hmm. Uh, since you essentially got the acting bug or the performing arts bug at an early age, did you go into different schools and whatnot, or were you or was it just essentially that you learn what you knew from from different other people?
Well, the first school that I went to when we came to the States was had a wonderful performing arts department. They also had a really great puppetry department. And so yes to both. Mostly with TV and film, mostly I just jumped in on my own doing short films and student films, and just really learned that way. And after that, I took some classes. Well, I majored in communications and took a lot of theater arts classes in college,
Yeah.
and at Wesleyan and at Mercer. And I also did a lot of just like theater programs when I was in high school as well. So both.
Yeah, it's weird because when my high school didn't have a theater arts program as it does now, but when I went to college, uh, the it's weird because two of my community colleges I went to, one they actually had a performing arts like its own performing arts thing,
Yeah.
but in my other college, the other community college I went to, it wasn't part. It was like for some reason it was like the same thing where it's like it was part of the communication like speech arts and communications department. So it's like it's weird that it's like, oh, you want to be an if you want to be in theater, you have to go to the communications department and then essentially go to the theater department within that thing. So it's like it's very weird how sometimes, well, not weird, but it's actually, yeah, it is very weird how sometimes colleges don't really give the theater department its own department unless it's like in a more 4-year thing where it's like it's actually part of the curriculum and stuff like that too. So it may be in due to like space and whatnot, or the college feeling like, hey, it's like, oh, it's like, oh, acting, it's talking, so it's probably speech, so it's sort of like the same thing. So it
Yeah.
it's odd sometimes, but in anything, but yeah,
Yeah, I guess they feel it's not broad enough. I don't know, but I mean, honestly, I'm sure they just have a theater department at like Juilliard, something
yeah,
that's just for the performing arts. This was this was a liberal arts school, so I guess it needed to be more broad in order to attract more students. I
Yeah.
don't know. Sorry, I am so out of it because of all this pollen. It is making me like bleh,
No,
I'm
no
like
problem.
melting.
No problem. My I'm filming this right as the start of the spring is ending to the start of summer, so there's like a lot more sneezing going on in the back. I'll probably be using a lot more tissues maybe during this, but
Yeah, right.
it's
Eh,
it's just one of those things where it's just like a lot of this weird. It's just like the allergies just happen to come up just right as the summer is coming in.
Yeah,
Anyway,
that's how I felt. And I never had allergies around this time of year before, so I don't know what's going on. I did also use a vape pen last night, which was pretty stupid. Probably didn't not doing
uh,
that again.
but yes, but back to your uh, performing arts degree. Uh, did you in college? Did you do any stage work? Like, were you in any productions and stuff like that?
Yeah, um I wrote a play that won um honors, I guess. And they put it on for me. So I wasn't in it, but I wrote it.
Hmm.
Um, so that was really cool to see your original work, put together like that. I didn't direct it or anything, just wrote it. It was great. Um, and that is the only theater thing I did in college. I wasn't real active in the theater community there, but I was still working as an actor in film and television. So that
Yeah.
part of me was already satisfied,
Yeah.
with the art side of things, because I did my first feature when I was like 17, I think, and just continued to work in the indie scene out of Atlanta ever since.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The and yeah. Speaking of indie scene, a lot. It's weird because when you're in, I'm not sure how it is in like different parts of.
Oops,
Oh, no,
sorry. I had set my alarm for 3 o'clock, and for some reason it decided to do something weird. Hold on. I'm sorry.
no problem.
Okay, I
No.
think I'm back. I'm back. I'm back in.
All right. Anyway, that's good to have. Like that's probably got to cut out anyway. Uh, sorry. Yeah, it's weird because I'm not sure how it is in other parts of thing, especially going out of college. But when you're in college and you're an actor, like the bread and butter of being an actor is essentially, short films, especially if it's like student films and whatnot. And you mentioned student films and independent films. Around the same time, did you feel like it was like when you were doing like when you were done with student films? Did you have like this like because it's weird because I would be trying there are a lot of independent filmmakers, especially who just come out of nowhere, and they done a lot of like student films and stuff like that too. Did you have essentially the same feeling of student films are like way different than they are with independent films, or is it just like the same thing where it's like I'm working with the same type of people that I probably working with any type of film?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. Only the students have more toys to play with because they're from the school.
Yeah,
But yeah, they're really comparable. You can make some really decent real footage from doing student films. I did a lot of SCAD student films, and I did some NYU student films, and that I did them for free, and they stacked my reel, and then I got an agent and joined the union. So yeah.
uh, and did you have any experience before with NYU, or was it just like NYU because I really don't want to trash NYU. I don't, I have friends who've gone to NYU, but uh, what did you have any? Because did you have any friends who went into NYU and stuff like that, especially who are actors and stuff, I think you know what I'm talking about. It's like,
No, I don't.
oh,
I don't know. I don't think I know anybody who went to NYU. Well, wait a minute, my buddy Kelly. She's an actor. Okay, I know one. Yeah. No.
okay, because sometimes when I've taught, it's weird because sometimes with people who I know from NYU, one of my friends, Kari, uh, he was like a sound designer or at least something like that at NYU, and some of the people who I knew happened to be friends with him. So like it's weird because when you're in the performing arts, or at least in the acting world, or at least in the entertainment world, it's very small sometimes, and a lot of people who just happen to be on stuff that you may have not worked with in the past, or essentially it's weird because a lot of the a lot of the people who you work with, sometimes they actually may have worked with people who you worked with in the past. So it's very interconnected, as I always mention. Uh,
Yeah.
so uh, so in terms of now, was VHS your first feature, or was
No.
it like your first like full feature, or
No, I've been making feature films since I was 17.
no? I mean,
Like,
uh, this is like the I'm starting to like. Oh, okay, now mine.
you mean anthology?
Yeah, anthology.
Is it my first
Anthology.
anthology?
Yeah.
Let me think. Yes, I believe it was. It was definitely my first found footage anthology.
Okay.
Um, yeah. But since then, I've done a whole bunch of them. They become very popular, haven't they?
Yeah. Just anthologies in general. Anthologies in general are the one things I do love about anthologies. They're all self-contained. They don't like rely on the same thing unless it's like a Tales from a Crypt thing or Creepshow, where it's like it has a host or at least some sort of like narrative thing. If you're doing
Mm-hmm.
like an anthology movie, it's fairly easy to do because you know all the stories you could do is essentially they can take place on Halloween. They could take place on New Year's Eve or something like that. And narratively, it's much more easy to do. But what I did like about Amateur Night was the fact that it is, well, VHS is essentially one whole found footage style thing, and this was made during like the height of the found footage like thing. What I did like about Amateur Night was that it kind of like takes the notion of found footage and just like, oh, it's like some because it's like, oh, some found footage means someone's using a camera. The camera itself is actually just part of the guy's, the like nowadays it'd probably be like a GoPro thing inside of on someone's head or something like that. And throughout the movie, it's like, oh, it's like it's actually in the guy's glasses, so or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
When you were filming that, is like, how was it like to film something that because I'm trying to formulate in a good question, because it's like it's hard because when you're filming something that typically requires you to with a camera and whatnot, how was it? It's like, yeah, was Amateur Night primarily filmed with a camera, or would they do like tricks to make it look like it's being just filmed with the 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 sunglass, not sunglasses, the glasses camera?
The spy glasses.
Yeah, the spyglass.
Um, they had a helmet and they mounted a camera in front of Drew Sawyer's eyes right here.
Oh,
And
okay.
so he couldn't see anything. And they put an iPhone on they glued the iPhone to the helmet here, so that would be a mod for the monitor. And and then they put like this furry thing on the helmet to make it look, so if you saw his silhouette or his shadow, it would look like hair. And then they put, at one point he also had a zoom mic on top of that, so it was absolutely absurd looking. And then they had a weight on the back to even it all out. So it must have been extremely difficult for him to work in that, but he did a great job.
Yeah, he did, especially since the character itself. He is like he rarely has any lines. I mean, he does have lines, but it's like the character is like yeah, it's like it's like the same thing with Lily is where it's like Lily rarely has any lines, but it's more along the lines of the movement that she does. Where and it's the exact opposite with his character, where it's like his character does have lines, but his movement is what essentially creates it to be actually much more of an impact because you're seeing it like in first person because the spyglasses, it's like and stuff like that too. And speaking of Lily, how it's and it's odd, it's weird because I never actually noticed this in the background before, but as they were going to like one of the clubs, I actually just noticed her in the background, just like randomly in the background, like, wait, is she? Is like, has she just been in the background this entire time? And I just haven't noticed until she like kind of like pops up. And it's like the stuff like that is like it's always good to watch on a rewatch, especially if you haven't noticed before. And I think it's because I'm kind of like bent on like stuff that's happening in the foreground that I don't really notice anything that's happening in the background. Uh,
Mm.
uh, but yeah, speaking of Lily, Lily is I want to say like half performance being like very special effects, and the other half being very physical. And you mentioned that you had ballerina or ballet training in the past. Did you employ that with the character? Because I know when Lily does move around, it is very ballerina like, or at least it's
Yeah,
very dancing like.
me and my stunt coordinator Elizabeth Davidovich, we developed the way she moved together. um Everything was a choice that we made, and I think it worked out really well. She was also my stunt double, and
No,
she's a gymnast and a contortionist.
oh,
So um so she made some of those movements look really cool.
yeah. In terms of the makeup, how long did because there's like two phases of well, three phases with there's like three phases. There's like the first phase which just has like that little crease in the middle where you kind of like notice that something's in the middle of the face, but you don't really notice until
Yeah.
like into her like succubus mode. And there is the succubus mode where it's like her face is like contorted up into like this, and she has like
Yeah.
fangs and that. And there's this third phase where she has her wings, which I didn't notice until I was rewatching it. That like you can notice like there's some bruises on her back that kind of like notice like oh that's where the wings are going to be like later. In terms of the makeup, like how long did that take compared to Siren, which is basically the same character, but it was like a lot like with Siren, it does feel like they had a lot more time to develop the character in terms of like the makeup.
Oh my gosh, I was in the makeup chair 24/7. It was awful. Because it was full body makeup, like for both,
Yeah.
and and plus the special effects stuff too. And anytime I would walk anywhere, not so much with Siren, but with VHS, they had they had silicone on the bottom of my feet. So when I would get up and walk anywhere, it would rub off, and I'd have to be back in the chair to fix it. And like my fingernails would pop off, and I couldn't go to the bathroom, and it was just like horrible. I hated it.
like I imagine, like I would imagine that just the crease thing itself, where it just pops open, and that would take at least several hours to do, because, or at least something like that. And
That was actually a little bit faster than
oh
the teeth thing, the siren, the teeth thing. That was tedious because they had to like stick all the little teeth and they would fall off and then put them back on again. Um, yeah, I have to refreshen the blood and repaint and blah, blah. Yeah. Yeah, the crease was that was just rigid collodium, I think is what it's called, or collodium, and where they just squeeze the skin together and put the goo in here, and then it looks like a scar, and that was really quick.
yeah, that's the one thing just watching the film, the two films back to back, is that I kind of like how it's like you just can't place it, but it's like there's something that little there's like that little crease thing that you feel like something is wrong with her, but at the same time, as a succubus, it's like, oh, she's just using her powers of alluring this to not really know to make that like kind of like a factor. But yeah, speaking of the character, between the two films, because Siren does like kind of like put the backstory into the character. When you were doing VHS, did you have like this backstory in mind where it's like, oh, she was the same backstory in mind, or was it something that like was
Oh
more?
yeah, no, I didn't have that backstory in mind. Not with the whole kidnapping thing. None of that. But we did develop a backstory.
Oh,
It wasn't nearly as in depth as Siren, but yeah, that's kind of what you got to do when you're developing a character from the ground up, which is what we were doing. Yeah.
yeah. So even though it is technically the same character, or at least I mean, it's essentially the same character. It follows the same thing. I do think with Siren, like they do add a lot more stuff that probably would have been interesting to see. Like at not only does Lily sing her Siren song, that it's interest. Yeah, there's a
That's
lot.
me. That's
Oh,
me singing. Yeah.
I was actually gonna wonder if that was actually you or someone else dubbing you, or because it does actually sound like it's actually on the set, like actually live.
It was, but it was also we also recorded it after as well. We actually recorded it in my living room,
Wow. That
which is
that's
not really the best for sound, but I guess it worked. I guess it worked out all right.
no, I recorded a show in my bedroom, so it's like this is not the best place for sound, but you gotta do what you gotta
Mhm.
do, especially if you need to do, if I ever learned something from my sound classes or stuff like that too, you gotta do what you gotta do. You gotta do what you gotta do in order to get that what's it called, the sound cue itself. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Man, oh my gosh, I'm gonna find a Zyrtec here soon.
uh,
For that.
now, I guess in terms of the character wise, did you see this as the same character, or was it just like the same character, just like more fleshed out?
I felt like it was the same character, just more fleshed out.
Because
She has a tail. Like, there's some differences. She's a tail. She's a slightly different face.
yeah,
Yeah, I was 10 years older. I don't know.
uh, like yeah, it does feel like it with Amateur Night. It's like it's a more self-contained story, but Sharon does feel like it's a more fleshed out story that does feel like oh, it's the same character, but it's like it's the same character, but it's like it's just she may have just evolved over the years,
I
or
guess.
yeah. Although now it's like, but where does this take place in Amateur? And it's like, and then you just try and then and then you have someone like me who was like, well, where does this take place in the timeline? Anyway, Yeah, I guess that's good. As much as I have for questions about Siren, Amateur Night, what have you, uh, because a lot of the a lot of the things I do had in mind was especially in terms of just the character itself and makeup and stuff like that too. Because I do feel like the makeup does feel a lot more impactful in Siren. I mean, it does feel impactful in Amateur Night because you know, given the fact that it's like, oh, it's like the first time you see her, and then everything else that you see in Siren is a lot, as I said, fleshed out, especially in terms of that. Uh, Now, I mentioned before that I mean, you mentioned before that you've done more anthology stuff too. Do you feel that anthologies are a lot more better? I wouldn't say better to film, but do you think anthologies are a lot more fun to film because it's essentially a self-contained story compared to a regular film, where it's just like, oh, you gotta worry about continuity and stuff like that too.
I think what's good about anthologies is that if you don't like a segment, it'll be over soon, and you'll probably find something that you do, within it, because there's lots of different voices, usually different filmmakers, different directors, different writers, and so that's what's fun about anthologies. It's just like, there's going to be something. There's going to be something for everybody in it usually. Um, it's not any different than filming a regular feature. Um, for me anyway, it's just shorter. It's the same.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah, it's pretty much the same. I mean, if you're the lead and you're in everything, it's it's the same. It's just like less days of filming.
Hmm. Uh, yeah, because I the one things I do about anthology, especially anthology movies, is that it's like even if you don't like one of the certain segments, there's probably gonna be another segment like maybe two segments away, or maybe the next segment where it's just like, oh, it kind of like brings the story back into the thing.
Yeah.
The only thing about anthologies that are hard to do is the the wraparound segments where it's like it's kind of like tearing. It's essentially tying all the stories together in Tales from the Dark Side, which is a great, Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, which is a great, anthology movie. The wraparound segment is a boy reading, fairy tales to, uh,
Oh, right.
yeah, to the witch that's about to eat him because they're doing the Hansel and Gretel thing. What's great about that is that, oh, it's essentially a boy reading, fairy tales to somebody. So any type of story that goes into the thing, it makes more sense because it's just a kid reading the story.
It's
Be-
like a Scheherazade kind of
yeah,
moment where she's distracting him from killing her with her stories. Like
yeah,
she's the original wraparound.
yeah. And with something like Creepshow, it's like the first Creepshow. It's just it's just I believe is the father reading the stories from the comic, or is this I haven't watched Creepshow in a while, so I'm not sure how the show is different because I know the show does just it. I know the show's rapper makes the segments more like, oh, it's just the comics itself. It's like it's just an issue from the comic or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of Creepshow, I know that you actually guest starred on an episode most recently on the show. Was How was that experience for you?
That was great. I loved it. I love working with Greg Nicotero and Justin Long. He was just like so nice and so much fun um to work with. I also just really enjoy everybody on their crew, like the makeup department, the hair department. They're absolutely amazing, and the wardrobe was all tailor made for me, and I got to wear all these gorgeous hats and things, and It was so much fun. It was the best.
I've seen photos of you on Creepshow. And it's like, oh, it actually does. It does feel like they had a lot of fun just trying to create a look of. I'm because I'm trying. Like, I don't want to like spoil myself, but it's like, oh, the character. It just says you're playing a countess, I think,
Hmm.
and or something to that effect. And like, oh, if you're playing someone who is a countess or a baron or something like that, you're gonna look like very regal type of clothing. So I just
Yeah.
imagine the clothing department is like, how do we make someone look very regal and still look like, oh, it's still a horror, like a gothic horror type of character.
Well,
Uh,
you have to see the episode in order to understand. I don't want to give it away because maybe some people haven't seen the finale of season 2
oh, this is the
yet.
finale. Oh, okay. I thought it was just. I thought. Oh, okay. This makes it more interesting now.
It is. It's a 45-minute one, and yeah. So I don't want to tell you anymore because then it'll give away the
To give
plot.
it okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I do want to like watch Creepshow as it is because it's
it's
I
good.
yeah
They did a good job. Yeah.
I someone actually reviewed a recent episode of it, and they did a Bob Ross versus like kind of like a Evil Dead thing, and I'm like, oh my
Yeah,
god,
my buddy, Mark Ashworth's in that. He plays Bob Ross.
and I'm like, oh my god, that actually does sound amazing to watch,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I watched the thing. It's like not only do they have like the Bob Ross type of like mannerisms and type like that, even though he isn't playing Bob Ross, he's just playing a character like Bob Ross.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they have like the mannerisms down. They have the fact that this is PBS down, and I'm like, they have the Evil Dead stuff down, even though this is not clearly Evil Dead, even though
Yeah.
they have Ted Reening, and it's like, and yeah, it's definitely a show that I do want to check out, and I probably will check out soon enough. And
Okay.
uh, I know that you say you didn't want to talk a lot, but and this is like and I could tell from the sound of voice and how I'm sounding right now too from my own mouth. I don't want to take up much more of your time. But
Oh,
I
that's all
do have,
right. Yeah.
yeah, I do have three more questions. That's fairly easy. One,
Okay.
one, do you have? Oh, crap! I did want to mention stuff about if you filmed because one of the things, yeah, that's probably not a question altogether. That's probably like something they probably don't want to talk about stuff like that because I had one of the other questions I had was like experiences with COVID, filming and stuff like that too, especially if it's like pre stuff. But again, that's a whole long discussion, and then that's like, I don't want to.
Yeah. I filmed a few features and three TV shows during COVID. And everybody was just really, really careful. And we just quarantined and just stayed away from anybody who wasn't in our pods. And it
Yeah,
was fine. I was actually working as crew on a feature that my buddy was doing, and one of the extras had COVID, and we had to shut down for 2.5 weeks. But that wasn't what I was. I wasn't acting.
oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah, in
Uh,
it.
yeah, because
Yeah,
I always feel like I'm not sure like what the type of stuff it is now because it, again it's weird because I've had people who work on their own little short films and stuff and they're very adamant on COVID precautions and stuff like that. Face masks if you're not in a scene. If you're in a scene, take your face mask off and so forth and so on. The crew would have their face mask on, stuff like that. But I've also talked with people who are like, if you get vaccinated and stuff like that too, then it's perfectly okay not to be, wearing your face mask all the time and stuff like that too. So I definitely do feel like within the next like year or so, it's like they're probably gonna have to reformulate everything in terms of just uh, not restrictions, but also just like filming precautions and stuff like that too. But back to my three original questions. Again, that's how my mind works sometimes. Back to my original questions. Do you have anything that's coming out in terms of like, yeah, if do you have anything that's coming out in like in the next couple of months that you do want to share that's like, oh, by the way, I have this thing coming out.
Yeah. I've got several movies that are going to come out soon, and I'm on the third season of Creepshow.
Ooh,
So,
nice.
yeah, yeah, it was so much fun. So I have a movie on location. It's, I believe it's got distribution and going to be out soon. It's a horror thriller, and I liked it. I really enjoyed it. And I've got another movie that we just shot up in Maine, and that one is called Time's Up. And that one's not quite finished yet, but it should be out soon. And then one that okay, so Dead by Midnight 1 and Dead by Midnight 2, I believe it just got distribution and will be out soon. And I act in both of them, but in the second one, the Dead by Midnight 2, Why to Kill, I actually I wrote and directed a segment.
Oh, nice.
And they're anthologies, both of them. And what else? What else? What else? I guess that's it.
Yeah, it it's fun to have a lot of this stuff coming out, especially when it's like now. It's like for the past like year or so, it's like nothing really hasn't come out because of COVID and like old theaters are shut down, and now a lot of films that were coming out last year are now coming back out now. So it's like much more fun now to. I mean, it's fun, but it's also probably going to be a lot more hectic as an actor, well, actress especially, saying, "Hey, how many premieres I had got coming out? 3 premieres, and they're all coming out like relatively at the same time." Okay, I can do this.
That's kind of how it is. It's like feast or famine. It's like nothing, 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 and then a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, I got 3 premieres within the same week. Okay, I can do this.
Cool. I feel fancy.
I feel fancy as long as it's in the same area."
Hmm.
uh, in terms of social media, do you have any social media that you want to plug?
Yeah, I'm on everything. Well, no, I'm not on TikTok, but I should be because it looks like people are having a lot of fun on there. Um, Instagram, I'm Hannah Fierman. I'm Hannah Fierman on Facebook. I'm Hannah Fierman on Twitter. I'm no, I'm Hannah Rose Fierman on Twitter. I don't ever tweet, so but yeah, I'm not real creative with my, what do you call it? Your handle? Your
Yeah,
handle? Yeah, I'm not.
yeah.
I don't.
It took a while for me to figure out what my creative handle will be, and it's like, you know what, I'm just gonna be me, and instead of just it's just gonna be me. And I was like, okay, there, I'm following me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
keeping it
Uh,
simple. Because I'd want to change it all the time. If it was something fun, I'd want to change it up. So I just got to keep it my name, and then I won't change it.
uh, yeah, and my third and final question is: do you have any advice, especially those who are just starting out, and especially out as acting, especially if they're just like finishing up, say, acting conservatories or acting schools or classes and stuff like that too, and they do, and especially especially if they do want to go into horror, but they kind of like feel like, oh, there is a certain stigmata with horror and stuff like that too. And that's always going to be an interesting conversation I want to have on the show. It's like the stigmata of horror and having people it's like, oh, I've done horror movies, and they're like, you've done horror movies, and people will always forget like the type of people who like got work on horror movies beforehand and now are major stars because of their work previously. Ugh.
Honestly, I don't think that there's much of a stigma anymore. People like to talk about the stigma, but I haven't. I haven't noticed it. Like, at least not in a really long time. Because everybody's into horror right now. Like
Yeah.
The Walking Dead, you know, and I mean, even the kids shows are like vampires and ghouls and goblins and Vampire Diaries, and everything's got an element of horror these days, and when it doesn't, it's either very very genre specific or it's
Yeah.
boring. Like, um, you know, everybody's a horror fan, whether they know it or not. Like
Yeah.
it's
And
it's like it's too broad of a genre to just blanketly say that you don't like horror.
uh but yeah, I guess that's it. Hannah, thank you for being a great guest on this podcast of mine, and thank you for being essentially the 50th guest. Well,
Wow.
yeah, the 50th guest. Well, 50th episode, 50th guest, but probably more. You're probably more than 50. Probably more than just a 50th guest, because I've had other people on the show that's like maybe four, like two people on the show, three people on the show. So, but technically,
Yeah.
this is the 50th episode, so you are the 50th guest. So, thank you for being
Wow.
the 50th guest on this podcast. Yes, I'm not sure where I'm going to go in terms of season 6 of my podcast. I am in the early stages of planning that out. I'm going to try and do specialty pod, like like not like pod, but like specialty episodes, where it's like I focus on a couple of things. I mean, a couple of like I might focus on 3 episodes on directors. I might focus on 3 episodes on writers, and so forth and so on.
That
But
would be cool. That, especially the writer one. There is a podcast I was listening to that's for writers specifically, these two guys that are in the writers union. And they had some fascinating stuff to say on there. There's a lot that you could do with that. It's a good idea.
yeah, especially since my next guest, who I don't want to say who it is yet, but he is a writer on one of the CW superhero shows, and
Cool.
I do want to talk to him about, especially a lot of stuff about writers and stuff like that too. So I am going to try and
Get him
try.
to write
I'm not.
a role for me, okay?
I'm not.
Slide my name in there. Just be like, hey bro, write Hannah Fierman a character, would you?
I know. I know this actress. She's very good. All right.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it, Brian.
Of course. All right. That's episode 50. Thank you for those who keep on watching this show or listen to the show. Just stay safe, take care, and be well.